Welcome to the Mental Dietitian Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Lynch Potter. This is episode 81, where I am just going to grab my phone and Google top 5 objections in sales. And just straight off the top of my dome, no planning, no nothing, just give my very best off the top of my head way to handle these objections. Now, I've been in sales for about 11, 12 years now. I have sold millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of products for various businesses. I've sold millions of dollars worth of cars, millions of dollars worth of personal loans, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of personal training. And I've got my 10,000 hours in. I've spoke to tens of thousands of people over the phone. I'm in phone sales specifically. But for you who are in in-person sales, I've also done that for many years. 3-4 years, I did that at personal training, selling personal training packages. And there's a lot I learned about sales. And I do sales quite differently than a lot of other people that I meet. I'm not somebody that's going to have, I know all the lines. I know all the strategies, all that kind of shit. But that can really get in the way of you putting the person first. There's no such thing as a prospect, by the way. Prospect is a label that a lot of people put on another human being, and it only exists in the salesperson's mind. If you can get out of that mentality of like, I'm talking to a prospect, I'm talking to a customer. If you can get out of that mindset, I'm like, and get to the place where you think, I'm talking to another human being. I'm talking to a human being. Cool. Okay. Well, what am I scared of? What do I get worried about? Well, they might get scared and worried about that kind of stuff too. So there's general principles that a lot of people do not abide by when they get into sales or want to work in sales. And by the way, every business is in sales. So if you ever want to own your own business, this episode's for you because you will be dealing with other human beings. So there's principles that I'm going to talk about when I have my phone here, and I'm going to read the top 5 objections. And most of the time, objections are because you screwed something up before that point. And a lot of people ask me, because I've taught hundreds of people sales, just in conversations, people I've worked with, people asking me advice, because I've always been the top 1 or 2 people everywhere I've ever been. Everywhere I've ever worked, always the top 3 in sales, as long as I'm putting energy in. There's been times where I haven't been putting energy in and I've slid down the rankings. But when I'm there and I'm putting effort in, I'm top 3 every single time, usually top 1 or 2. So let's have a look here. The top most common retail sales objections. The price is too high. Well, that makes a lot of sense. That sounds like it'd probably be the most common objection is the price. It's too much. It's too much money. You screwed up somewhere in the process of getting to the place. If you get to the close where you're covering numbers with somebody, you screwed up somewhere by not explaining it or finding out before you even got to that point. So for example, I sell cars right now. The initial phone call is the initial time you ever speak to a customer is just answering like, why? Hey, why? Why are you here? And here's the thing. Boom, here's little tip. When you want to ask the customer why, don't ask them, hey, why do you want to do this? Why are you here? Because why questions I've found in my thousands and thousands of conversations with people are very direct. And sometimes when people get asked why, they immediately get on the defense. Immediately. It happens. It's, hey, why are you here? So what you can do is you can ask why in a different way. So the way that I ask why is, what's the reason? And when you say, hey, why are you looking for a new car? versus, hey, what's the reason you're looking for a new car? I am asking why, but it doesn't come off as abrasive. I've found sometimes people get asked why questions, and I've even felt it myself. Is when I get asked a why question, there can be a response in some people that they feel like they're being interrogated, attacked, whatever. So the first initial conversation you have with somebody is like basically the why. It's why you even want a car? What's the reason you want a vehicle? What's going on? Because if you did a really good job on the front end, that objection of the price is too high, you would have already been handling it during the sales process. So by the time you get to the close, it's not like you're bringing something out of nowhere. And a lot of salespeople do that. They get scared of talking about numbers. They get scared of going over the money side of it. So if by the time they get to the point where they're like, yep, this car's $50,000 and it's going to be about $400 every 2 weeks. And obviously we already spoke about that. I know you can make that work. How does that sound? That's kind of when I get to the close, when I talk to people, even when I sold personal training, I will tell them around rough ballpark of what it's going to be and then provide value around that. Now, some people don't even touch numbers. They don't even go near them. They don't go near them until the close. I have never liked that. Anytime I want to find out that I'm going to buy something or explore something, I want to find out what the number is, usually. And if it's very high, I'm like, cool, they must have a lot of value around it. So if you're getting objections all the time, is the price is too high, there's a few things you may have done wrong. Number one, you might have just avoided it because you have fear around going over numbers. Number two, you haven't really listened to the client initially, especially if it's outrageous. If somebody says they can only spend $300 a month on something, and you're going to show them something for $1,000 a month, you're asking them to triple their budget. Triple. But if somebody says, hey, I can spend $800 a month, and then you show them something for about $1,000 a month, you've only increased it by about 25%. So you can show things a little bit higher than what they said, but you can't be ridiculous about it. So a lot of people have that, oh, what happens if the client says that it's too much money? I believe that objections in general come about because you didn't develop enough trust on the front end. If you develop trust on the front end, you are handling objections the entire time. The close, some people say, the close starts from the immediate conversation. Immediately is you're like, somebody says they want a certain thing, and maybe that doesn't exist. Hey, I want a personal training 5 times a week, and I want to pay $100 a week. Well, I want a Bugatti for $1,000, but obviously that's not going to happen, right? And I'm sure you already know that. So what can we do here? Because obviously you can't get a trainer for 5 sessions a week for $100 a week. So that's step one. You just close them on, hey, that's not possible, but what is possible? Always being a solution seeker. And that could be on the first conversation. I get people all the time that call me and say, hey, I want a car for $200 a month. And I might say something, I'm like, I wish I could, or absolutely we can do that. Do you have a very large down payment between probably 15 to 25,000? Oh no. Yeah, just not possible to get your payments around 200. Can you do anything more than that? Because here's how much they cost. I just close them on a perspective. What is sales? It is influence. If you can influence people in a way that you are still in integrity. I have influenced people, manipulated people to get sales hundreds of times. I know I have. And to say that you haven't if you're in sales is a lie. But there is a way of doing it where the client is very happy, they get what they want, and then obviously you also are getting a great commission. But You have to develop trust on the front end. And the price being too high objection, I believe is you haven't developed enough trust. So by the time you get to the point where they say, hey, the price is too high, you should already know that. Number two, that's number one, straight off the top of my head. Number two, I've seen it cheaper elsewhere. This goes into, and you see this stuff on Instagram and you see it everywhere. It goes into the classic value versus cost. If you were going to buy a tattoo, would you want to get a really cheap one, or would you want to spend the money and get something that's of higher value that's going to be in your body the rest of your life? When I would sell personal training, I would sit down with people and they would say, hey, it's way too much money, or I've seen it cheaper elsewhere, or some version of that. And I would always counter them with, well, how much do you spend on your car per month? And they're like, oh, about $400 or $500 a month is my payment. I'm like, okay, cool. So that's about $6,000 a year if it's $500 a month. Yep. I'm like, well, this training package is about $7,000 for the year. So it's a little bit more than your vehicle. Now, will your body last longer than this vehicle you're driving? Just asking questions. Obviously, we know the answer is yes. But I want to give them the perspective of that, hey, you only have one home to live in, and it's your body. Would it not make sense to invest in your body versus spending more money on your car? Now, that's a very logical question. But if somebody is busted broke, they're just going to feel like you're pushing them into a corner. So it's all about like, hey, do you find value in this? Do you want this? And if the price is too much, going back to the first objection, I've found that those two objections tie into each other. If somebody thinks the price is too much, they're going to say, I found it cheaper elsewhere. So if you are providing a service or you're selling a product that you know is absolutely top quality, you can bring up the value. People don't spend money on things they don't value. Why do luxury brands like Christian Louboutin or Louis Vuitton or Chanel or Gucci, why do these brands exist? And why do people pay millions and billions of dollars for them per year? They believe that the money they are spending is worth the value that it costs. So if somebody says, I can get it cheaper elsewhere, and you've done a great job of building the value of it and explaining why it's so valuable, then maybe they can get it cheaper somewhere. Maybe they can, but maybe they can't. And if you have a very unique product or service, especially if you're in personal training or if you're in coaching or if you're in something like that, when it's specifically tied to you. So not only do I sell vehicles, but I also do integration coaching, mostly for people who are going through ketamine infusions. And I do transformational coaching, which is kind of like high performance coaching outside of that as well. Just coaching in general. If somebody said, hey, I can get this cheaper elsewhere, I'd be like, no, you can't, because I'm the product. It's me. You cannot get me anywhere else. You cannot get my perspectives, my ideas, my thoughts anywhere else. But if I'm in the business, in my day job, which is selling vehicles, sometimes people do get the vehicle somewhere else, way cheaper. And they'll call me like, hey, I've got this opportunity way cheaper somewhere else. If I know that I cannot beat that, I will tell them to go take that deal. Do you know why? Going back to what I first said, I'm talking to a human being. Of course I want the sale. Of course I want to make money. But if I'm doing that when I know that that person could get a way better deal somewhere else, way better deal, and they've already found the deal, they've already found it, they've got me. By me trying to double down on trying to sell them that, I'm just, that's not it. That's the icky salesman. We get it often where, like, for example, used cars right now, they're a little bit more expensive. If somebody can get their hands on a brand spanking new one, it's usually a little bit cheaper because of the interest rates. It usually is. And if they can do that, awesome, good for them. But a lot of people can't get approved and there's things like that. But we had a guy the other day that went to I think he went to a Mazda dealership and he brand new one, it was cheaper than what we could do for him. And we were frustrated. It was like, oh man, we spent so much time with this guy. But of course that makes sense. Why would he take our deal when he pays more interest? It's used. You can get a brand new one for a cheaper payment. Awesome. So what I do is I'm always like, congratulations, man. That's a great deal. Go take that deal. Oh, what do you mean? I'm like, go take that deal. I can't beat that. Go get that deal. That's a great deal. Do you know what that does? It builds trust. It builds trust in the client because they now know that, hey, the person isn't trying to think about themselves. They actually were trying to help me the whole time. If you do that, you will get referrals from people that you never even sell anything to because you are a salesperson that is standing in integrity versus a salesperson that's constantly trying to manipulate and connive and scheme and trying to get everything from everybody else. You won't get referrals that way. And I know people in the same industry that rip people's heads off on their front end. Very good service on the front end, but the service doesn't continue. So they don't really get referrals. And I know other people that always look after their customers no matter what. And the amount of referrals that they get over the long term is so much more. Therefore, they'll always make more income by being a good person and putting the client first because you're talking to another human being. So that's number two. And number one, the price is too high. And number two, I've seen it cheaper elsewhere, are very tied into each other. Here's one that is very common. I've heard it so often. I need to talk to my partner. Listen, you're an idiot if you haven't found out they have a partner, especially if they're going to invest thousands of dollars in something. If it's a couple of $100, maybe you can use your sales tactics and be like, well, do you think that does your partner care about you? Do they want you to have the best results? Like all that kind of stuff. But if somebody's buying a product, which is hundreds of dollars per month on a subscription model, or they're paying, like buying a car, a house, coaching, service, renovations, anything that is big for your life, you are disrespecting their relationship by not bringing their partner into the picture, especially if you're just talking to the guy. A lot of guys like to think that they're the boss in the relationship. Sorry, pal, you're usually not. The amount of times that I have lost deals because the wife sabotages the deal because I didn't have the foresight to include her in the process initially, which was actually disrespecting and dishonoring their relationship because they told me they had a wife. And I proceeded anyway because I was trying to sell this person my product or service. If you get to the point where you're selling somebody something and like, oh, I need to talk to my partner, you fucked up because a moment, I've said this to people, if I'm on the phone with somebody, I'm like, oh yeah, so John, do you have a wife or anybody who's going to be driving this vehicle or using this product or service? Yeah, of course. I have a wife. Cool. Before we continue any further, I want to make sure that she's included in the process. I want to make sure that I'm honoring your relationship by including her in the process, because obviously we're buying a vehicle here, right? So if you're buying a vehicle, it's the second biggest purchase you'll ever make outside of your home. And if you ever never buy a home, it's the biggest purchase that you'll probably ever make. So it makes sense that I include your wife in this process, right? So of course, that's what I say on the phone. Like every single time, like, well, yeah, same with the wife. Now, if they disagree and they say, hey, my husband and I don't work with like that, I'm the number one decision maker, cool. You won't come across that objection, because if you come across that objection later on in the process, when you initially have that conversation, though, I need to talk to my husband. Hey, Michelle, you said 2 days ago that you're the number one decision maker here. And I wanted to include your husband because I wanted to make sure that everybody's included in the decision. I don't want to keep anybody out. I know for a fact that if my wife came home and she said, hey, I want to spend 10 grand on something, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? So a lot of people get to these points in the sales process because they made a mistake on the front end, especially that I need to talk to my partner first. Anytime they bring up a partner, I would just say like, hey, when we do talk about numbers, Let's bring your partner in so we can all sit down together and figure out whether or not this is the best decision for you. Because I don't know what your best interests are. Here's a little segue. Anytime somebody says that they have your best interest in mind, that is absolute bullshit, because the only person that can know what your best interests are you. Nobody else. No other human being on earth can know what your best interests are. Zero. None. Nobody. Except maybe your husband or your wife. Maybe. But apart from that, nobody knows what my best interests are, especially the salesperson I met a week ago. So never say that. Never say, oh, I have your best interest in mind. Never, don't ever use that. You will rub people the wrong way instantly, maybe even subconsciously. They might not even know, they just don't want to talk to you anymore. So include the partner in the process. When I talk to somebody, especially if they've got a partner, I like sending options to both the husband and the wife, sending pictures of vehicles to both of them so they feel included in the process. I'm not dishonoring their relationship. So the objection, I need to talk to my partner first, doesn't come up because I've already spoke to them during the process. The goal is to get so good that these objections never really come up because you've already tackled them by tackling them at the start, by asking really good questions. This is a one that I need to think about it more. If somebody says that they don't feel safe enough and they don't trust you enough to tell you what the real reason is, I need to think about it more. No worries, John. When I show people things, it's usually the price, the payment, or the product. It's one of three things, or it's me, or you don't like me. It's one of four things. So I know that you need to think about it. What is it for you? I know you love the product, the vehicle, the service, the coaching. I know you have. You told me you loved it. Cool. We've removed that. That's gone. That's not in the picture anymore. I don't think it's me because we have a fun time together, unless it is, and unless I'm completely out to lunch and I'm really bad at reading people, but I don't think that I am. So we've removed that it's the product or the service. You love it. Remove the fact that it's probably me. So it's the price or the payments. So sometimes there might not be payments per month. Sometimes it's just an upfront price. And if it is an upfront price, then maybe you can break it into payments for the person. But it's really about having the conversation, and in a way that doesn't feel like you're in the dark. I remember early on in my sales career, people were like, oh, I need to go home and think about it. Oh man, that sucks so bad because I didn't know what to do. I was like, fuck, think about what? Oh, I just need to think about it. And then the conversation is, I don't trust you to tell you what is actually going on because I feel like you're going to talk me into something. And I don't trust you. That's what the client is saying. The customer, the client, the whoever it is, the human being on the other end of this process you're going through does not trust you enough to tell you really what's going on. So I need to think about it. And if you understand these principles, which is, oh, they don't trust me. Okay, well, absolutely. Of course you need to think about it. It's a big decision. Of course you do. You're buying a vehicle, you're buying a house, you're buying coaching, you're buying personal training. This is a big change. Of course you need to think about it. What's the biggest thing that's concerning you right now? And then you can break down those things. Is it the price, the payment, me, or the product? Like, what is it? Because I want to create a safe place where you can tell me what's going on, and I'm not going to try and convince you into it because that's not my job. You have your best interests in mind, not me. I'm here to give you information and to share my product or service with you. And if you think it's a fit for you, awesome. And I know I will deliver on it. And I know that I provide high amounts of value. And I know that you're going to be very, very happy on the other side of it. If you can say that to somebody and look them in the eyes and say that, I know that I will deliver on what I've told you. And I know that you want it. So what is the holdback? And just having the conversation in a caring way. And even if they go the other direction, you don't react and snap on them and be like, oh, well, I guess you're going to be broke forever, or I guess you're going to be fat forever. That's just you're just being a little kid. You're being a reactive little kid. You're not being a professional. Not everybody is going to buy your product or service, and that's okay. Treat them well anyway. Treat them well anyway. So that's number 4. I need to think about it more. Number 5 is I don't really need it. What does it say here? What does this internet thing say? Your reaction. Let's see if I agree with this. Try to get the shopper to imagine what life would be like with the product. Allow customers to try it before they buy it. Free trials, demos, and samples are a great way to effortlessly convince them that they do really need it. Yeah, I don't know. If somebody's like, oh, I don't really need it, then you haven't built the value in it. Of course, somebody doesn't need something that they don't see that they need. But if you've explained your product or service and found out initially, hey, why? Why are you here? What are you looking for? I'm looking for something that makes my life easier with my business. Cool. What are you struggling with? Oh, accounting. Cool. There's this software. They might not know what they need. There's a famous quote from Steve Jobs, which I absolutely love. Now, Steve Jobs was being convinced when he was building the iPhone with the single button at the bottom here, before they got rid of the button. Now it's just a swipe bar. But when they had that button, that was revolutionary. And all his engineers, all the design engineers that designed the phone based on the drawings and based on what he said he wanted to do product research. They wanted to go out in the marketplace and put it out there and see if the customers wanted it. And he has this quote, and I don't know if it's his quote or if it's Henry Ford's quote, but Steve Jobs quoted it anyway. And he said, we're not doing that. Absolutely not. Why would we do that? I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, people don't know what they want until they know what they can have. And people don't know what they can have until something is made available to them, until something is showed to them. So when you're talking to clients, sometimes people don't know what they want until they know what they can have. And they don't know what they can have until you show them things. So if you're in the personal training industry, they don't know how amazing their body can feel until you show them how amazing their body can feel. They've just lived in their current reality for so many years. They're like, oh yeah, I guess it'd be nice. But they don't actually know how it feels. When somebody says, oh, I want a new car, sometimes they don't know what they want until they see the model. They don't know. They don't know all the brands that you know. They have no idea. If they're buying insurance, if they're buying anything, they don't know particular products exist until you explain it to them. And that might create a need that they might not have known existed, or they maybe couldn't communicate to you on the front end. So there definitely is a place for that. And it all comes down to, if you're a really, really good listener, sometimes you can sense what people want based on the language that they use, that they want subconsciously, but maybe they don't understand they want it consciously. I have learned this a lot through coaching. All the coaching techniques that I have, all the things I've learned about the way human beings communicate. For example, if somebody is using the word should or could or shouldn't all the time, that's all shame-based language. Because anytime you say, oh, I should have done that, how do you feel? A little bit lower. Shame. That's shame. You're feeling shame. Oh, I could have done that. Shame. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Even when I say it, I can feel it in my body. It kind of lowers my energy. So if somebody's saying that all the time, I know that they're a shame-based person. All the time. I can talk to them on the phone. I'm like, okay, cool. This person operates a lot out of shame, which means my job is to make them feel as safe as possible through this process. Because as soon as somebody's scared, they're going to freak out, and I'm going to lose the rapport, the trust I've built with this person, and they're going to go somewhere else. So listening, if you become a master listener, then you'll be a great salesperson. But a lot of salespeople are just trying to say what they want to say versus actually listening to what the person is saying. That's another principle. It's more about listening than it is about talking. Don't get me wrong. Talking and communicating is very, very important. But what is more important is listening. Because if you're a great listener and the person feels heard and seen, and they actually understand and feel that, hey, this person's actually listening to what I want and what I want from this process, I want to do business with them. Because remember, all things equal, price equal to your competitor, everything equal to your competitor. People will do business with that they like, trust, and they know. Simple. And they don't know you yet, but they can like and trust you very quickly by being a great listener and genuinely caring about what is the best interest for them based on what they tell you. And the best thing for them might not be your product or service. It might not be. The world isn't one giant pie where it's just a little slice, and if somebody else gets a bigger slice, then it takes away from you. The world is a bakery. You are a bakery. You can create your own bakery. You can bake your own pies. The world is full of opportunity. By somebody else winning, that doesn't mean you are losing. So bear that in mind when you're talking to clients and customers, because you're talking to other human beings. And if somebody else has a much better service than you, and you know it, and you can already tell that they don't trust you, and you're probably not going to get the deal. By the way, this takes time. This takes time to get to this point. I wouldn't do this if I'm an entry-level salespeople. I would just hit my head against the wall and try and learn. But hopefully, these perspectives and this mindset that I've shared with you really helps you if you're learning about sales, or if you've even been in sales for a long time, or even if you're not in sales. All these communication, all these principles help by talking to a potential friend, somebody you work with, a manager, somebody that you are managing. All of these things work because they are, again, we're communicating with other human beings. That's what sales is. You're communicating with another human being, finding out what they want, and hopefully filling that need of what they want. So I'm going to do some more on this, more sales kind of stuff. Hopefully you get something out of it. It's been in my blood for a very long time. I've always loved it. I've always found it very fascinating, the psychology behind it, why people do what they do. And I look forward to sharing my personal experience and what I know so you can better your life in whatever arena you are in. So I love you guys. We'll talk to you next week.